So I want to thank everyone for participating in the Black is Beautiful panel. It's a great honor to have all the panelists here, along with having all the moderators here. With that being said, the moderators are going to take control of this event, and we'll go from there. But thank you on behalf of Stanford High School, on behalf of our staff and our students. We truly appreciate your time. And with that being said, I'm going to let Rebecca kick it off.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Black is Beautiful panel hosted by Building Bridges. Thank you all so much for joining. As we celebrate Black History Month, we decided to host a panel to shine a light on 5 inspiring individuals. These individuals have taken their opportunity to share their stories with us, and for that, we are truly grateful. So I'm going to have Trina recite a quote for us that will help set the tone for the rest of the evening.
Michelle Obama once said, "Race and racism is a reality that so many of us grow up learning just to deal with. But if we ever hope to move past it, it can't just be on the people of color to deal with it. It's up to all of us, Black, white, everyone, no matter how well-meaning we think we might be, to do the honest, uncomfortable work of rooting it out. It starts with self-examination and listening to those whose lives are different from our own. I believe it's important to educate ourselves on Black history, and like Michelle Obama said, it starts off with self-examination. Listening to those whose lives are different from our own. We should not only be open to hearing these particular stories during a particular month, but we should make a conscious effort to open and hear these stories throughout our lives. I truly believe this is how we can all grow and learn. We thank these panelists for exposing us to greatness and providing us with this opportunity. Thank you.
We would like to allow our panelists to introduce themselves and their careers. In addition, we would like to know why they believe it is important to participate in panels like this.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Okay. I love this question. And for me, growing up, I never really saw anyone that looked like me. I didn't have, like, my teacher, I went to an all-Black school in Virginia, and all of my teachers were white. And we never had any guest speakers that came in. So I never really saw myself in any of the sort of administration or anyone that I would see within my school. And when I went to college, I had my first Black professor who taught psychology. And it was such an amazing feeling to see that representation and have someone that looked like me. So that's why I feel like participating in panels like this is so important for you all to be able to see yourselves in us, because growing up, I never had that.
Yeah, I echo that myself. I'm Dave Smith, and growing up, I grew up in Stanford, along with Mr. Escobar there, and Focus. And I tell you, growing up in school, I never really had a lot of Black teachers, myself. And so it's good to have representation, and just coming up, us Black kids didn't really see ourselves in a lot of different places. So it's good for people like myself, other panelists, to reach back and just to sort of give you a glimpse of what different industries and careers look like with people that look like you.
I go by Focus. I believe that these panels are important because of community. I believe that it really does take a village, and we all need to strive to build stronger bonds in this community of ours, Black, white, whatever. I just believe that it's so much stronger and it's so much more important for us to look at the fact that we're here for one another. And somewhere, somehow, everybody started to lose humanity. And they're not looking at the fact that we need to help each other build each other up. So that's why I think this is important.
So I'm Melissa. I would just like to echo the other panelists as well. I think especially with this, this social climate, with everything going on, Black Lives Matter and everything, it's important to have, an open discussion in a safe space, and, through the discussions that we have, just be able to empower each other and inspire each other.
I'm Chief Justice Richard A. Robinson, and I agree with what all the other panelists said. I think if you want to call us successful, I think as successes, we have the obligation to reach back and pull up. You don't pull the ladder up after you've made it up. And I think we also need to keep that community connection, because that community is what made us what we are today. I've heard a little while ago, someone said it takes a village. It does take a village. None of us got to where we are by ourselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Guadalise. I love panels like this because it's great to see other folks in other industries being wonderful representation of our communities. But I also love talking to young folk because I think it's really important to allow ourselves to be seen and connect with younger generations, so that there's some, pipeline, or also allowing for direct contact and connections. Community is very important, but I think that also connecting intergenerationally is really important, and allowing for the next generations to feel like we're just like a phone call away or just an email away, or really just reaching out a hand and being able to help each other out in that way. So thank you for having me on this panel.
All right, so my first question is for Chief Justice. So in your journey in becoming the Chief Justice in the Connecticut Supreme Court, what were some of the barriers you encountered, and how did you overcome these challenges?
The barriers that I had were probably similar to the barriers everyone on this panel had, whether it was racism or whether it was implicit bias. I always found that I had to prove myself again and again and again, and that can be wearying. It can be tiring, and sometimes you get tired of fighting that battle. And I think that probably is the feeling that's the hardest to overcome. There's I don't know if Lou Hamer is, but she once said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." You do feel that way every once in a while. And if I had to give one piece of advice to all of you, it's that you gotta keep on no matter what, because you have two real choices in life. And that is to accept the status quo or to change the status quo. And everybody on this panel, we voted to change it, to do the same.
Dave, would you be able to describe your role as CEO/founder at Inflow Analysis? In addition, would you be able to describe more about the company and your day-to-day responsibilities?
Sure. So, so as a CEO, I sort of founded Inflow Analysis several years ago after I had a long stint as a technology industry analyst at Gartner. It's based there in Stamford, Connecticut. It's just pretty much like the number one, analyst firm in the country and the world, for that matter. And so my role basically in spearheading Inflow is sort of to spearhead the research agenda, which generally looks at the overall digital workplace. I research the trends. I research the technology providers like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Zoom, Apple, and I present my analysis on those companies in published reports. I'm a contributing writer for CIO Magazine. I do podcasts. I do a live show called Inflow TV, where I get to interview business leaders and technology industry executives. So it's a lot on the plate, but I provide IT and advisory services to companies all over the world for the most part, and also help the technology companies I mentioned before, the Googles, the Facebooks, on their messaging, marketing, and product strategies to help them meet the needs of their customers, who in some cases happen to be my clients as well. So I help the tech companies on one hand, but also lots of other companies or other organizations like school districts, Fortune 500 companies, and what have you on the digital workplace strategies.
Okay, so my next question is for Melissa. Would you please elaborate on your transition to the United States and what challenges that you encountered, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Sure. So I'm originally from Barbados. I went to medical school and trained and everything in Barbados. And then I came to the US for my residency. So it was definitely a culture shock, you know, coming from a country which is, you know, at least 90% Black to, you know, to the US. You know, growing up, it was, you know, there was definitely no thought in the back of my mind, like there's, you know, there are things that I can't achieve because of the color of my skin, just because I was surrounded by so many, you know, like well-educated, successful Black people. So, you know, and coming here, it was a big challenge. You know, I was pretty anxious at first, you know, wondering, you know, are there people, like random people, are there colleagues, patients that are going to, you know, want to discredit me or, you know, basically reject me because, you know, not only am I Black, you know, being from a completely different country. So, you know, as I believe it was the Chief Justice said, you know, community is a big part, you know, of that. So I was actually able to, you know, surround myself with, you know, different friends, different cultures, you know, that, you know, we were really able to empower each other. So, you know, that was, you know, a big deal for me.
Thank you.
All right, so focus. The entertainment and music industry is an extremely competitive market. What are some of the challenges you encounter in the music industry, and how have you been able to overcome these challenges?
Everybody has challenges. And honestly, Chief Justice said it great that you have to keep on. I've gone up against a lot of racism just coming up, even in the school that me and Dave Smith went to. I was there from 2nd grade to 12th grade, and I ran into a lot of opposition due to my belief, due to my skin color. And then, you know, once I told everybody at my school, which was a college prep school, that I was doing music, everyone told me that that was not happening. So I thought it was just normal to have that much opposition and to meet the challenge. And, you know, even with my father being in the music industry, I had no other choice. I felt like I had to do what I had to do. And I didn't give myself a plan B on that.
Okay, the next question is for Janice. What influence has your cultural upbringing had on your career, and how has it shaped the person you are today?
Sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting myself. So my parents have had a really huge influence on me as a person and my desire to pursue more. So my parents are originally from Cameroon, which is Western Africa next to Nigeria. And so, you know, growing up, my parents really emphasized the importance of education and how, like, the way that they had made it out of their particular circumstances, which is abject poverty, the way that they made it out was through school and through education. And so they really emphasized that to me. But one of the other things that my parents were really instrumental in doing was helping me to see my own power. And I think that each of us has so much power. Sometimes it's difficult for us to see how much power we have and how amazing we are. So I think that when it comes to the influence that my parents had, they were really, really instrumental in showing me the importance of education, but also helping me to understand how to stand in my own power.
Thank you.
My next question is for Guadalise. How did you discover your passion for playwriting and theater?
So I've always been a writer. I will say that I was blessed to have Black women teachers from, I would say, 4th grade to about 8th grade. And then funny enough, after that, I didn't really have any Black teachers in high school or in college, which looking back on it now, like I'm like, there was a shift. There was definitely a shift in my life, disconnecting from these amazing women that nurtured my writing. They were very adamant about me writing in a journal or me reading books. They, you know, really nurtured me reading a lot of books. I grew up in Chicago, and I went to predominantly a Latinx grade school, but I was the darkest one. So I was definitely made to feel a little bit different than everyone else. And having amazing Black female teachers that could spot that and understand that, they really nurtured me in a special way. So that's when my writing started. Playwriting, I started when I began acting as an adult. And I started doing theater because my agents were like, if you want to be taken seriously as an actor, you need to start doing theater. It wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to go straight into TV and film. But when I started doing theater, it was this weird adrenaline rush that I hadn't felt in a really long time. And I started doing more theater than I was going out for TV and film stuff. And then I started writing my own work because, again, as a Black Latina, I never really found work that reflected me, my identity. And on top of that, it was also really hard for me to be cast in certain things because it was always like, oh, well, you don't look Latina, so you're not Latina. And the idea that being Black is something that you can find anywhere in the world and not just, you know, in the US. And then I just kept writing plays, and now I'm going into doing some screenwriting as well. And it's been a really amazing journey, but theater is definitely something that I think I'll always do, just because there's a thing of being in front of an audience and doing performances or writing something that you get that immediate reaction from an audience that you don't always get when you like edit stuff for a TV show or for a movie that you watch on a screen.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in if you don't mind. I just, if you guys can just briefly introduce what your career is, what your profession is, and then we'll go on to the next question from there. Thanks.
So I am Dave Smith. I'm an industry IT analyst in the technology industry.
So I'm Melissa Weeks. I'm a physician at Bridgeport Hospital.
I'm Chief Justice Richard A. Robinson. As the Chief Justice, I run the entire judicial branch of the state of Connecticut. I have 3,500 employees, 200 judges, and a budget of $500 million.
Hi, I am Dr. Janice Gassim Asari. I am a professor. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and I am a writer and an author.
My name is Focus. I'm a music producer. I work for Dr. Dre and Aftermath. I've been doing that for some years. I've been in the game for a little over 30 years. God has been good to me. I've gotten Grammys, I've gotten awards, and now I'm here, and I want to work for the Chief Justice. Let's go.
Oh, I'm Guadalis. I'm a playwright and a screenwriter.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask the next question, which is directed for all the panelists. What or who inspired you to enter your career, and what has been the most rewarding part about your career?
I'm gonna answer if the other panelists don't mind. I didn't hear the first part. Can you give me the first part again, please?
Yeah, I said, what or who inspired you to enter your career?
Okay, all right. My father was the reason that I got into music. I wanted to be exactly like him. It's so funny that Dave is on here. We literally grew up together since, what, 8th grade, I think it was. And we were making music together. So he knows my passion for music. And I literally did not do anything else. And just moving forward, I honestly and truthfully have a passion for just creating. And I think that was the thing that that's what changed me into what I am now, because I didn't do it for what these kids call the bag. I didn't do this for monetary reasons. I didn't do this for fame or glory. I did it because I honestly love making music. And I think that that's what just us doing this right now and talking to them on this panel, they need to understand that this is not an overnight thing. Nobody here was made overnight. And everything that we're doing right now, even giving you our time, is because we chose to, but we had to do our due diligence to get to where we are. And this was the only thing I knew. I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to to Focus, because since we were kids, I mean, he always knew that some people just know what they want to be when they're up, and he's one of those kids. He always knew, like, there was no plan B, C. That's what he wanted to do. Me, it took me a little while, right? And so I did the traditional path after high school, college, and for me, it's my first gig. I was a business major in college, specialized in marketing. And actually, back up, me and Focus both grew up in Stanford. So all you Stanford folks, Stanford in the house, right? So, so when I went to college, I did marketing, business management, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So when I came out of college, my first job, I was doing like support work. I worked for a company called Gartner that I mentioned before that did IT research. And I began to, as I was supporting the clients that subscribed to the research, I began to read the research. And it began to interest me. I began to realize that the technology piece of it was the piece that was vital to every company. Every company depended on technology. And I'm like, I want to understand that, right? And so I, sought out mentors within the company, said, teach me technology. And those mentors began teaching technology. And that's how sort of I got into the whole technology field. I got the mentors to teach me, and then they brought me up and recommended me to be an analyst in the technology field.
So in my case, I guess I've wanted to be a doctor since I've been, as far as I can remember, because of my pediatrician. So I've always hated going to the doctor, still do. I get really anxious, so my pediatrician just made me feel completely at ease. Every time I had to go, like throughout the years, we just developed, a bond. And, I just wanted to be more like him. When people started asking, like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? The wheels just started turning, like, I kind of would like to be, like Dr. Frank. So, it kind of only strengthened throughout the years. And, in school, I just kind of gravitated towards like biology and chemistry. So, everything just came together.
When I graduated from college, I wasn't sure, when I was about to graduate from college, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I had a great mentor, Dr. Ben Magabani, and he told me that he asked me what did I want to do, and I said I wasn't sure, but I was thinking about going to law school. And he's an amazing guy. He was from South Africa, and his mother was a Hottentot, and his father was a Zulu. And he said, law school, you don't want to do that. You want to go to med school. And I go, oh, I think I want to go to law school. And what I didn't tell him was the foolish reason why. In my young mind, I thought law school, 3 years and I'm done. Med school, 4 years, 3-year residency. It's like, oh, forget that. But he actually talked me into keeping my options open. And so I did apply, and I was accepted in med school, and I applied and was accepted into law school. And I'm glad that I made the choice for law school, because that's where my passion is. I wanted to make a difference where instead of dealing with one patient, I can actually deal with this entire world where Black people are so disaffected and disenfranchised. And I wanted to make a difference in the world. Did I ever think that I would become a judge? The answer is no. Governor Rowland actually asked me twice, and I told him I would think about it and I would apply, and I didn't do it. And he came to me the third time, said he wasn't going to ask me again, and I accepted that time and became a judge, and didn't think I would get to the appellate court or the Supreme Court, let alone Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But the thing that I did was I kept my options open. I got as much training and education as I possibly, because I wanted to make the choice. I didn't want to be forced into a choice. I didn't want anybody to make a choice for me. So after I got all the education, if I decided I want to be a motorcycle mechanic, I could have been a motorcycle mechanic. If I wanted to be an attorney, I could have been an attorney. I kept all my options open. And I'm looking here at Mr. Smith, and I think about the Gartner Group. I have to tell you, if you don't know what the Gartner Group is, it's amazing, incredible. I'm so happy to meet all of you here. And I'm Focus, you just make me nervous because I remember what your dad did back in the days when I used to go to the clubs. Just don't tell people I went to the club. But the Gartner Group, the Magic Quadrant, I learned all about that in one of the cases. So my advice to all of you would be get as much education, no matter what that means to you, whether that means a professional education, whether it means education as far as a job, an art, whatever you do, get as much of it as you can, and you get to make those choices.
I'll go next. I miss the clubs. I'm just gonna be honest there. So I was raised watching telenovelas, Spanish soap operas. So it almost feels like I was destined for the dramatics. And it's funny because my mom has always wanted me to be a lawyer. Like literally I was born, she's like, this one's going to be a lawyer. And I'm like, you should have had me watching law shows, not dramatic soap operas. Like, just set me up for that. But again, like I'm beyond thankful to my teachers in grade school because they really pushed me to nurture the thing that they could see that I was good at, or the thing that would really light my eyes up. And I've had so many different teachers throughout, my school years, and they all would say the same. Like even in chemistry, whenever there was like a moment to do like a presentation or a performance, they would all say the same thing. Like, your eyes light up when you like have to like perform or do something. Like normally they're glazed over, you're not paying attention, you don't care. But when it's time for you to like, do something somewhat dramatic, like your eyes light up. And it's like, it's really that thing of sometimes other people see the thing that you're the most passionate about, even if you're not like constantly aware of it. But yeah, for me, it definitely was my amazing teachers and La Revancha de Diana Salazar that would come on at like 7 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday.
I think for me, so I believe that the question was who inspired me to get into the work that I do. Well, people ask me that question a lot. Like, how did you get into, so a large part of what I do is companies hire me to do trainings and workshops around anti-racism, inclusion. And I don't know if I froze because I froze on my end. So I would say that what really inspires me, or what has inspired me to get into the industry that I'm in, is just seeing what my parents went through and what my parents experienced and how they experienced so much racism and discrimination when they got here, and just what they continued to endure. And I think I've always wanted to figure out how to make this world just a better place and create more opportunities and dismantle the oppressive systems that we all experience. So I think that would be what has really inspired me to do the work that I do.
Okay, thank you guys for your answers. The next question is for Chief Justice Robinson. This past July of 2020, the Hartford Courant stated that you called for real and immediate improvement to the state's judicial system as ongoing nationwide protests intensified longstanding calls for major policing and criminal justice reforms. Would you be able to discuss and inform us on what you believe is real and immediate improvement?
Yes, excellent question. Let me put it this way. 2020 was an amazing year. If you think about all the things that happened, the social unrest, the pandemic, the election difficulties, all those things were happening at one time. The justice system is slow, rely on precedent. If you think about it, we move very slowly. Things that were going on in the justice system that we all knew about, but we weren't addressing. And the kind of things I'm talking about are, let me give you a good example, sentencing disparities. If you look at two people with the exact same criminal background, with the exact same status and everything else, but one's Black and one's not, the Black person will tend to have a longer sentence. So what causes that? We know about things now like implicit bias. If you are taught your entire life, if all the things that you see, all the media and everything else says that Black people are more prone to violence or Black people use drugs more. And by the way, all that's false. If you look at the data, Blacks and whites actually use drugs at the same rates, proportionately. So most of the people who are in our prisons are either there for drug charges, or because of violation of probation. So the numbers shouldn't be the way they are, but they are that way. Well, the other problem is, where does drug enforcement and where does police enforcement occur? It occurs in urban areas, not as much in suburban areas. So you have Blacks being sentenced at a higher rate. You have the prison industrial complex. You have implicit bias in the jury system. There's a case called Batson versus Kentucky. And in that case, a prosecutor was striking all the Black jurors because the defendant was Black. The United States Supreme Court says you can't do that. That's a violation of the person's rights. So after that case, you would think that the situation got corrected, but it didn't. It still happened, because what Batson said is it's improper to do explicit discrimination. So they would come up with other reasons to strike the Black juror. And this happened in a case called State versus Holmes, which was a Connecticut case. I authored that opinion, and I, because of the status of the law, we rely on past precedent. And if you look at the past precedent, what the prosecutor did, I couldn't reverse that case. The Supreme Court couldn't reverse that case. So I affirmed the case, but I created a statewide jury task force to deal with a number of different. One is what I just told you about, the implicit bias issue of striking Black jurors. Another one is that lower number of Black than is called for by the population. So if you look at Black people in Connecticut, that many jurors weren't showing up. So I had to start doing something about that. All these changes that courts really don't talk about. The interesting thing about this year is that when George Floyd died, there's 50 state Supreme Court justices, right? And then there's the territories you add on to, like Puerto Rico and Guam and things like that. Over half those state Supreme Courts and state Supreme Court justices actually said there's a problem with our criminal justice system. There's a problem with our civil justice system. There's a problem with access to justice. Some people can't afford justice and others can. That shouldn't be. If our system is going to be fair, then it has to be fair to everybody. So I made a deliberate and explicit goal of the Connecticut judicial branch to fight that kind of issue, to make sure that we do provide access to justice, to make sure that we deal with limited English proficiency, for example, to deal with the fact that if you are poor, if you're living from paycheck to paycheck, you can't afford to take off a day to come into court. And that may cause you to fail to appear in court. And then you have a felony or a misdemeanor failure to appear. There are 42,000 pending misdemeanor failure to appear warrants in Connecticut. 42,000. Something has to be done about that. And we are doing something about it. And quite frankly, I think that because I'm a Black man, I can focus my attention on those kinds of things with a lot more energy than if I had not been. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm doing my thing and making sure that it happens.
My next question is for Dave. How did you find your way to the IT industry, and how can we encourage more minorities to enter this field?
Sure. You know, it's funny. I listened to Chief Justice. I said some of this before, but you know, there in my industry, there's definitely not a lot of Black people or people that look like me, right? And I do find that there is a lot of that implicit bias that he mentioned before, especially in the tech field. We find that a lot. Now, I've presented myself at and spoken at IT conferences all over the world, from Australia, China, London, Brazil, Argentina, and Black people are definitely underrepresented. And so for me, I didn't, seek out, like I mentioned before, being in IT. It went to school for marketing and so forth. And so for me, it was just almost just, realizing how important technology was for business, for life, and wanting to understand it more. And then that's what, again, led me into my field. Now, what I think in terms of what exposed me, to the mentors that chose me was I wanted to understand how they thought about technology, what their research methodology was. And I began to look and talk to some of the major technology companies, like Microsoft. And then that led me to start writing, research myself. And so the mentors, like I mentioned before, sort of led me into the field that I'm in now. And, that's how I got into it. And I think for, people that look like me, it's basically, find those mentors, if you're interested in something, find those mentors in that field, ask questions, seek people out to try to get, the answers for yourself about the interest that you particularly have.
Thank you.
Can I add something real quick to that, Dave? And I don't know if you can kind of speak to this. There's the conversation around Clubhouse. I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with Clubhouse. Yeah. 510, I kind of recommend. I don't know, but I don't know if I would recommend it. It's fine. Sometimes, other times it's not. But one of the really interesting things with Clubhouse is that it's like now valued at $1 billion or something like that. Yeah. And a lot of that was driven because of Black folk that would come on to the app and really drive a lot of creativity on there, where before it was very, Silicon Valley based and a lot of tech bros and all of that. And then Black folks started coming on and doing really amazing creative things on there that really drove up people being more interested in it, and people doing a lot more fun stuff on there, but also doing a lot of creative things on there. And it's the thing of, the Black dollar, right? And the Black contribution to a lot of the innovative things that come out. And I think I just wanted to add that in there because I think that that's also really relevant to seeing more Black and brown folk in technology, and how important that is to also make sure that we're innovating these spaces so that we can be the ones that financially benefit in this way. I mean, it's not even an app that's available for everyone yet, and it's already valued at $1 billion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like I said, like what I do, I remember when the George Floyd stuff happened, right? Now, like I mentioned, I speak at different conferences and so forth in the tech field. I'm actually out here in the Bay Area now in San Francisco, California. And I remember after the George Floyd, all the tech companies sort of put out their Black Lives Matter statements. They want to be inclusion and diversity. D&I was like the big topic. And I remember I went from getting, requests to speak at conferences, say I got like, a couple of months, or like every week someone wanted me to come on their panel. And one guy kind of let the cat out of the bag. He's like, I've been getting a lot of criticism that my panels are all white people. And I'm like, so that's why you're actually paying for. I mean, I get it, but I'm telling you, it was right after the stuff from this summer, I began to see people so almost give lip service to diversity and inclusion. But it did start a conversation, which I think is important.
Okay, for Melissa, would you be able to discuss the impact that education abroad has had on you? How do you believe this has influenced the way you practice medicine?
So as I said before, being from, a predominantly Black country, I think there are a lot of, Black patients that we see here, especially at Bridgeport Hospital. A lot of them are, immigrants as well. So I think that it's allowed me to, reach and connect with, a wider variety of patients. A lot of the Black patients get really excited when they find out, like, especially like if I'm from the Caribbean and stuff. And, sometimes they confide stuff in you that, they normally wouldn't. There is a lot of fear in the Black community, regarding the medical system. I'm not sure if you guys heard of like the syphilis study from the past. Like, Black people have just been, basically been distrustful of the system. So I think just, having a different perspective, even with subtle context clues and, cultural references, I've been able to, just be open to a wider variety of patients and make them feel heard, make them feel seen and, understood.
May I add something to that? I think Dr. Weeks hit a major point there. When people see us in the positions that we're in, that lets them know that it connects to us. I can tell you when people come in the courtroom and they see me on the bench, it's a lot different than I think most of them expect. And so, let me see, I was the 5th Black appellate court judge, the 4th Black ever to sit on the Connecticut Supreme Court, the 1st Black ever to be Chief Justice. And still, it amazes me how people look at me. There was one incident involving our courthouse in Bridgeport, which was a tragic incident. There was a shooting in front of the courthouse. And I immediately rushed with my chief court administrator to the courthouse to make sure that the employees were okay and things like that. And the state troopers were doing an investigation inside the courthouse. And they run up to my chief court administrator and say, well, chief, and my court administrator looks over at me and he's all embarrassed and he goes, he's the chief justice. So they go up to the white guy and say, hey, hello, chief. And it's like, but that trooper learned something that day. And so it's really important that we acknowledge that there are things like implicit bias. And I don't know if you know what implicit bias is. You have to account for things. There's more than racism there. There's something else there because you have these really good intentioned people who make really bad decisions when it comes to things like race or gender or sexual identity and things of that nature. And mind scientists have looked at this and said, wait a minute, people are associating things together that they don't even realize they're associating with. So if you, as I said earlier, if you, all your life, you've been shown stereotypes, even if you consciously reject that stereotype can still influence your decision. The best way I can describe it to you is, have you ever run into somebody you started to immediately like or dislike and you couldn't quite figure that out? Or if you're talking to somebody and you suddenly find out they went to the same school that you went to, and now all of a sudden you start to like them more. My family, we're a family of martial artists. My wife is a 6th degree black belt. I'm a 4th degree black belt. My son's a 4th degree belt. And people often ask, well, if you guys get in competition, who wins? This way, winning isn't everything. Teach you a lot of things in life. We're a very competitive family. But the thing I've noticed is that when we go off to do a competition somewhere else, like we went to China for a couple of weeks to do some competitions out there and to go to Shaolin Temple. When I ran into an American, it was like, I thought that American was like the best person on this earth. Person could have been a serial killer, but somehow I identified with that person. I made all these shortcuts, and that's what implicit bias is about.
Thank you.
Okay, so my next question is for Focus. You've had the opportunity to work with amazing artists such as Dr. Dre, Beyonce, Kendrick Lamar, amazing people, some of my favorites. Who do you think is the most inspiring artist that you've been able to work with?
They all inspire me. The closest bonds that I have in the industry is people like Marsha. She's like my sister. Marsha Ambrosius from Floetry. Of course, Dre, he's like my big bro. And it's the people that I've solidified real relationships with. I brought up community just like Chief Justice did, and we all spoke about it. But it truly takes a bunch of people to help you attain or get to where you're trying to go. I was in the studio by myself creating, but I was creating music with and for people. And that's where my journey began and started to really get intricate, because I wasn't working with regular people, which let me know, with all the insecurities and whatever was projected on me, and I saw in racism and things like that, I knew I wasn't regular. And I think that with this generation and the class that we're even speaking to today, you're going to have to attack your life in a different way than I did. These times, this day and age is so different. Chief Justice said 2020 was an amazing year. I had a lot of loss during that year, but I do understand what he's saying because it was prophetic. We know that things are going to get worse before they get better. It always happens like that. So you have to look at a different way to attack your life, whatever it is, whatever your passion is, whatever you're doing, you have to see a different way to do it, because you don't want to be one of in this world, in this entertainment industry, in any industry that you're in. Once you're one of, you're a blank face. And I promised myself that I wouldn't be one of. I promised myself I was going to be the one, if you will. And it's just different now. I actually, my heart goes out to all of these kids right now, because this is a whole different day and age right now.
Thank you.
So my next question is for Janice. In your bio, you state that your mother always emphasized the importance of injecting good into the world, and that your ultimate goal is to help infuse more love into the workplace through necessary and candid conversations that lead to changed hearts and minds, followed by systematic shifts. What is the most challenging part in having candid conversations about race?
That's a great question. I would say a lot of the white leaders hire me, but they're not ready to actually change. So as has already been stated, a lot of companies post George Floyd, like after George Floyd, I was getting calls after calls after calls. I was getting so much business. And these are the same companies that after the pandemic hit, all of them had lost their diversity budget. You know, it was nowhere to be found. And then after George Floyd, that's when all of these companies suddenly reemerged. And so they'll hire me and they'll say, we want you to talk about anti-racism. You know, that's like the new buzzword. We want you to talk about anti-racism, or we want you to work with our executives and tell us how to create more equity. And there was a company that I worked with, their CEO. I spoke with him and I said, you know, one of the biggest things when it comes to getting more diverse talent is thinking about your recruiting and looking specifically at your referral program. And I'm not a huge fan of referral programs because I think they just create more white males in the workplace. If you want diversity, referral programs are not the way to do it. There's a lot of research that indicates that. I told this CEO, you should get rid of your referral program. And he straight up said to me, we're not going to do that. And I'll tell you that right now. So it's kind of like you're hiring me to help you because you recognize that this is an area where I've done a lot of research. I have an expertise in this area, but you're not ready for change. So it's also this idea that companies recognize now that like they need to make the change, but they're not holding managers accountable. A lot of the people that I speak with say, well, I feel like I can't speak out against my manager, or I'm experiencing racism and I can't talk to anyone about it because I'm going to get fired or demoted or whatever it is. And it's like, it's nice to have mentorship programs. It's nice to have all of these things, affinity groups and employee resource groups. But if you are still hiring and keeping the racist people in the workplace, it's not going to do anything. And I think a lot of executives have trouble understanding this fully. Sometimes people aren't ready to have the conversation. So I would say that that's the biggest challenge that I experience when I come into these companies. And if I notice that the company leadership is not trying to listen to me, I personally just don't work with those companies because I feel like I'm going to come in, I'm going to be the face of diversity and nothing will change. So I feel like it's a waste of my time and it's a waste of their time. So I think that would be the biggest challenge, is like the resistance to change that I've experienced when working with these organizations.
If I can add to that, you know, I see that a lot here in Silicon Valley, you know, where she mentioned a lot of companies will, you know, put out these, you know, Black Lives Matter statements, and they'll do, you know, we have this D&I, diversity and inclusion, and they make it a number that they have to meet. And so, okay, so now you want to hire 50 Black people. So you get them in, but you have no culture around. You don't accept their culture. And so they come and then they go right back out because there's no system or mechanism. The systemic injustice, inequities are still present. They haven't dealt with that first part yet. So
Thank you.
I also wanted to add to that, because that's also like a shift that's happening in theater as well. Like a huge movement came out over the summer, which is what it's called, We See You White American Theater. And it was to call attention to the anti-Blackness and the racism and the lack of actual diversity inclusion within these institutions, whether it's on their stages or especially on their leadership and boards. And the Broadway League recently let out a statement after all these conversations about wanting to be diverse and all that. And it was like patting themselves on the back for bringing in 2 people of color to a board that's like of 50. So you want to pat in the back for bringing in 2 people when you still have like 50 folk on there that are not representative of the change that you're saying that you want to see. And, you know, it's very, we see it in theater, and it's, you know, been a huge conversation, and a lot of EDI folks are being brought in to have these anti-racism conversations and to teach and educate. But it's like, it's just conversation, and that's what it is. Like everybody's, buying the books and reading the things, but the actual steps to make the changes, it's like, that's the difficulty. It's like, oh, that's where we stop, because then we have to make the real change that is actually uncomfortable. The conversations are uncomfortable, yes, but it's the actual steps to make the change that is the even more difficult thing to do.
Cool. Okay, so the next question is also for Guadalise. It's, you've released a variety of plays throughout your career. Of the many, which do you feel was the most impactful?
I would probably say, I mean, for me, they're all impactful. But the one that I've noticed that's gotten the most response, I would say, it's called Bees and Honey. It's a what we call a 2-hander. So if any of you have seen like Malcolm and Marie, it's kind of along that line of a couple just trying to figure out how to love each other with all of the outside things pressuring them. And it's a Black Dominican couple set in Washington Heights. And it's, you know, it's that conversation of the thing that I've always really been interested in is, as the world changes and we push for, you know, more progressive ways of being, how do those things affect our relationships with each other? So you know, the couple that I have in this play, it's really them two talking about, how do they become more progressive? How do they become more feminist? How do they create more equity within their relationships with each other, but also their relationships with their friends and their families? And, you know, we'll have these conversations about change and moving forward and being more equitable, but it's like, well, so how do you have that conversation with like a father or a mother or an uncle that, you know, is racist or doesn't believe that Muslims, you know, should be in this country, or XYZ, all the things that, you know, create barriers for all of us to live equitably. So I'm really proud of that play. It was supposed to have its off-Broadway debut right before the pandemic, but that got shut down. Right now it is being looked at different TV networks. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, I love all my plays, but that's the one that people seem to like the most.
Okay, so we're on our final question, and it is, what advice would you give to high school students as we're trying to navigate the world around us, especially during this unpredictable time?
Wow, well, the world has changed, right? And you know, I would just say, you know, honestly, just don't worry about trying to figure it all out, because I haven't figured it out. I'm sure none of my parents have figured it all out. You know, we're all, you know, trying to make it right now. And so I think, you know, just be easy on yourself, you know, be open to new opportunities, you know, be curious, just learn as much as you can. And the word, I want to reiterate, the word community kept coming up a lot. Immerse yourself in a community of people of like minds, you know, who are interested in you and interested in helping you, and also seek out those people as well too.
Yeah, I would say, just to reiterate what Dave said, I am really, really big with community. And I think that in any environment that you get into, whether it's high school or if you go to college or wherever you are in the workplace, you need a community of people in order to thrive. And that community of people is what's going to really propel you forward. I know it sounds corny, but I really do believe it takes a village. And as Chief Justice said, once we reach certain levels, it's so important to bring others up with us and lift others as we're climbing. So I think developing and leaning into your community, especially now, because it's hard for everyone. I can't even imagine what my high school would have been like if social media was around when I was in high school, which it wasn't. So I think leaning into your community, things have shifted so much. Lean into the people that bring you joy and make you smile, and finding ways to connect with them, whether that's, I'm a huge proponent of Clubhouse, but it can be an interesting place. But I think whether that's like Clubhouse or Instagram or TikTok or wherever it is, find your community of people, find your tribe, and lean into that and use that to really propel you forward and support each other.
Yeah, I'll also add, community for me has been super important, not just getting through this pandemic, but just in my career, having people that believed in me and in my work. I will also say that as a creative, and I would imagine this could apply in anything else, is there a lot of times, and I'll say this, that social media can sometimes be conducive of this. This is why I'm saying I give Clubhouse a 5 out of 10. There's sometimes this thing of feeling like you're not at the level where you should be because you see everyone else stunting this or that. And I think that the person that you should be more focused on trying to compete with is yourself. And even in that is find ways of doing that healthily, because you can you can cause mental health issues if you're constantly negatively competing with yourself. But I think raising the bar for yourself is really important. Always finding ways of how you can be better at the thing that you love to do or things that interest you, and not focusing so much on what other people are doing, because real talk, you don't know what people are thinking or going through behind closed doors, or when they log off of that social media app.
And can I just say one last thing? Guadalupe reminded me of something I forgot to mention, but that's so true. Social media is all a sham. People are always fronting on social media, or as you kids say, cap. It's all cap on social media. People are not who they say they are. So I would not focus on what you see, because everyone's sort of putting on a front on social media. So don't use that. I use that to inspire me. If I see someone doing something I think is amazing, I'm like, wow, that's amazing to see that. But everyone is at different levels. Just because everyone your age is doing something doesn't mean that that's necessarily your path. So don't be discouraged by what you see on social media, because 95% of it is all cap, as you kids say.
I would suggest that you seek good mentors, and don't wait for somebody to mentor you. Go out and seek those mentors. They were extremely critical in my life. I think everyone here has talked about how mentors are critical in their lives. There's always somebody who knows more than you do. Seek those people out. The other is good friends. And, I had friends who were amazing. There was a point where I had gone to school for so long that I got tired and started to give up. And I had this one friend who would tell me towards the end of the summer, he would say, "You ready to go back?" And it's like, "Well, what?" He says, you ready to go back?" And it's like, "What are you talking about?" He says, you don't belong here right now. This isn't for you. You need to go and get that education." And he would literally just hound me until I left town and went back to school. If it hadn't been for him, quite frankly, I don't know if I would have finished school. So having those kind of friends with positive energy who will help you obtain those heights that you can obtain is really important. The last thing I want to say is not just find a mentor, but you can be a mentor yourself. Find mentees and mentor them. You have to be part of this chain that we've created.
I just want to encourage everybody to, stay focused. I know it's easier said than done with, all the distractions going on. You know, high school is hard enough, so I can't even imagine like, you know, classes being in-person classes being interrupted, having to, you know, concentrate at home and, you know, all the uncertainty. But just know yourself and set boundaries. You know, if you know that you are going to get distracted from, you know, studying and stuff, if you have your TV on, you know, just I think discipline and, you know, setting boundaries for yourself is more important than ever during this time.
Awesome. So there's a couple of questions we have in the chat box. I'm going to read the first one. This one's for Dr. Melissa. Can you explain medical school? And I know there was people who were racist and tried to make you feel uncomfortable or like you did not deserve to be there. What was it like medical school in your experience, Asari?
So I guess fortunately for me, but unfortunately because I can't really answer that question well, would be because I actually went to medical school in Barbados. So at least 90% of my class was Black. You know, all the professors were either Black or Indian. So I was fortunate in that regard, you know, in terms of being empowered all around. But you know, I could imagine like in terms of doing interviews when I was doing residency here, they predominantly, you know, American-centered programs. I did at times feel at certain interviews like, you know, I didn't belong, just because of the culture and the atmosphere. So I think it's, you know, important in choosing a school to see how you feel, yes, but even in those uncomfortable situations, you know, just always try to shine, you know, be an ambassador not only for yourself, but, you know, for, you know, minorities in general. And, you know, it sounds cliche, but just hold your head high wherever you go and put your best foot forward.
Thank you. Another question we have here is, I would like to know if any of the panelists could go back in time and give their teenage self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm gonna jump in here. If I give or gave my teenage self any advice, it would have changed my trajectory of where I am now. Everything that I went through got me where I'm at. All the bumps and bruises, all the pitfalls, and all the highs. So, the only thing I would really tell myself is don't loan a whole bunch of people money that can't pay you back. That's about it. I mean, we all know about that when you turn around and you need to help some people out. It all sounds fun and games, but then when you need that help back, and it's no discrediting anyone, but when you need that help back, you never know if that person needs help again. So you just have to be very discerning. You have to be shrewd. Money is very easily attained, but it is easily given away too. So that's the only thing I would tell myself. But all the bumps and bruises, all the pitfalls, all the peaks, like you need all of that to get to where you're going. I wouldn't want to try to avoid any of that.
Yeah. I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, I should have listened to my mom a lot more. She was wiser than I thought. She knew things and how to navigate the world. I'm just like, Mom, whatever. Because she brought me up for the most part as a single mom for a lot of my life. And I tell you, man, the stuff that I remember now that she said back in those days, I'm like, that was a wise woman. I thought she was crazy, but she was wise. And so I should listen to her more. That's all.
I was just going to say really quickly, everything that you're going through now seems bigger and more major than what it is. I remember stressing over so many boys in high school and stressing over just relationships and things that I thought were bigger than what they were. And now that I'm like so much later on in my life, I'm just like, I used to keep a journal. So I would look back and see the stuff that I wrote. And I was like, I was really obsessing over this issue that I don't even remember until I read back. So everything feels bigger than what it is. But I would just remember, as Focus said, to just keep going, and all the bumps and bruises make you who you are. So I would try to lean into them and embrace them.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually about to say that exact thing. Like, I guess I've always been a type A personality. So even as a teenager, I would be anxious about, well, pretty much everything. But, each stage of your life is going to have different challenges. But just looking back at, some of the things you worry about as a teenager, is going to pass.
I'll say I appreciate Focus for saying what he said, because sometimes I do think back, like if I would have done anything different, but then I'm like, but I might not be here. I might not, my trajectory might have been different. If I would have studied for the LSATs, I would have gotten into law school and I wouldn't be writing plays. But what I would say that I wish I would have listened to my dad was save money. Like if you can open a bank account, a savings account now, and just start putting $5, $6, $10, you don't have to put a lot in there. But if, like, real talk, if you can start putting in like, $5, $10 in there, starting that now from like allowance, or if you're, out there working and hustling, like save that money. Like real talk, like those gym shoes, they'll be cute for a week, but once they start to get dusty, they ain't gonna be cute no more. So like, I'm not saying don't spend your money, but I am saying just try to save, at least like a small percentage of it. I think one of the things that we experience in Black and Brown communities is the fact that, we don't have savings, and it's something that, obviously we don't have the same type of wealth distribution that you see in other communities. But if you can start in high school saving a tiny portion of your check or whatever money you get that comes in, it'll make a huge difference when you're like 30, 40, or 50, or when you're like at retirement age. If you can look now into like IRAs, like I know this sounds like, oh, that's when I'm like 40. No, if you start setting yourself up for a savings account that you can look forward to, you don't have to be worried about it when you start to get older and you start thinking about like retirement and all that stuff. That's honestly, like, if I could go back in time, I would save my money.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question, and it's along the lines of what Chief Justice Robinson was speaking of. Can each of you talk about someone that came along in your journey that had a major impact, and tell us what was it that person did?
I'm gonna jump in again. There were a number of people that helped me, knowingly and unknowingly. When you see people, there's a way that you can look at them. You can look at them like you're looking up to them, like they're your mentor, like they're an idol, whatever. But then you have to be realistic that they're still human. And knowing that men get up and put their pants on one leg at a time and use the bathroom and things like that, you start to now bring them out of that orbit that you don't think you can attain to, and it helps you look at them in a different way. And people like DJ Premier, Prince, Stevie Wonder, they were just amazing to me, and they helped me. My father, and lastly, Dr. Dre. To even work with somebody that I looked up to. But then when I saw the vulnerability, this isn't a secret. We all know what he just recently went through. To see the vulnerability, to see that this man is not superhuman. He just does superhuman stuff, and it's something that you have to find within yourself, and you have to push. I'm not going to be long-winded. I lost my son in 2020 to a drunk driver. He killed him. My wife left me in 2020. My grandmother passed. Like, it was just a lot of stuff back to back. But I have 4 existing beautiful children, and I have to keep going. And no matter what it is, and no matter how I feel, because I can curl up in bed and give up at any given moment. How do you turn around and use that as an excuse to the people that depend on you? You have to push. And Dre taught me that, because right after he got out of the hospital, that man was back in the studio. We were back in the studio working like the day after. You know what I'm saying? So you have to push through. And I know that a lot of times it's going to feel hard. I forgot if it was Guadalupe or Janice that was saying how you're flexing over things that are not even going to be important soon. You know, yeah, Janice, you were saying that, how you used to journal over boys and things like that. It's like, man, you're not even going to care about that when you have to pay your bills, when you have to make sure that you're eating, and you have to make sure that, you know what I'm saying, you're taking care of your family if you're having a family. So prioritize, make sure that the things that you're doing, if you're going to line yourself up with a mentor, make sure they're like-minded. Like Dave said earlier, you surround yourself in a community with like-mindedness, and that's what's going to help you. These people might not physically take you by the hand, but you'll be able to create your steps and make your move.
I'll focus on, sorry for your loss this past year. It's been a hard year, as much as there have also been blessings, but it's important to acknowledge that. I'll say for me, I've been inspired by a lot of people that have come across my path. And that's why, you know, I agree with what Focus said earlier. It's like, you know, if I would have done anything different, I might not have come across these people. But I will say that the first theater that produced my first play, it was in Spanish, and it was a Spanish-speaking theater in Chicago. The theater was founded by a woman who immigrated from Colombia, not knowing any English, and had a child. She founded a theater company that is still thriving now. I think the theater has over 30 years that it's been, you know, producing work. And they produced my first play. And one of the things that she said to me was, don't ever be comfortable with the first thing you put out, right? And as a playwright, it's a thing of you're constantly nurturing and making sure your work is looking good. And, you know, and I've seen artists, it's like they put something out, they're like, it's great, but it's like, what, you know, constantly striving for excellence. And that was something that she taught me and has been really helpful in my career, to not settle for the thing that I put out once. It's always like, always strive for excellence within your work, and always push yourself to make the thing that you're doing be better continuously. You know, shout out to Beyonce, who's always like pushing the envelope there. And that's something that I really look up to her on, is always pushing yourself to be better than the last thing you put out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I agree, you know, with all this, and especially what Focus was saying. So we were friends when we were kids. We're still friends now. We're in a panel. Mr. Escobar, we've been friends when we were, you know, kids. We're still friends now. And so that whole concept of, you know, surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, who help you, you know, who now they still inspire me. Those are my influences. You know, Focus is my influence. Mr. Escobar, those are my influences. They have inspired me from when I was younger, and even now seeing them sort of fulfill their career paths as well too.
This may sound a little corny, but one of the people who inspires me the most is my wife, Nancy. She is my karate instructor. But let me just say how amazing she is. We did a tournament down in Bermuda years ago. And after the tournament, she collapsed, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong. We got back to the States, and they found out that she had a congenital condition that was pressing on her spinal cord, and had to have an immediate operation. And it was very serious. And they removed the lamin from 4 vertebrae in her neck, which is they take off the back of your spinal column. And so despite all that, she was pretty sick for a while and laid up in bed and rehabbed herself. And by the time the next year came around, we went back to that same tournament. And I think that year she had won gold, and silver. And when we went back 12 months later after this major operation, she won gold, and gold, I think it was. So, you know, you have somebody here who is told that you may not be able to walk because of what's happening here. And the thing that caused all this is a severe autoimmune disease. And she's never let it stop her. She just won't. And that's amazing. So when I sit here and I think about my little problems, it's like, no, that's amazing. So when you see people who battled adversity like that and Focus, I also want to send my condolences to you for what you've been going through. because that's some tough stuff. And, you know, to be able to get up and keep going after that, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You have two choices. You can give up or you can keep going, and giving up is not something you should ever consider.
Yeah, I just to echo that, you know, and my heart goes out to you, Focus, because I can't even begin to imagine what type of year 2020 was for you. And so thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And again, my heart goes out to you. And you know, just listening to stories like that and seeing people like that, what you've gone through, Focus, and just, you know, my mom is the person that inspires me. And to the justice's point, I think like seeing the insurmountable odds that people go through and they're still able to wake up in the morning. I ask myself, would I have that much strength? Would I be able to do it with a smile on my face? And my mom has been through a lot. You know, she experienced so much racism, and she was a teacher. She experienced so much racism in Georgia, and she ended up one day just quitting and saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I was like, you know, and everyone I would tell that story to was like, why would she quit? She had a good job. That's, you know, now she's unemployed. That's ridiculous. But it just like seeing that you're in a system that is oppressive and that is racist and that is not doing anything to better the world, and being willing and being brave enough to say, I'm not going to do this anymore, to me is so inspiring, because I think it's so much easier to just accept the status quo and accept how things are and just say, well, I'm one person, I can't change the world. But I'm so inspired by people who are able to just say, this isn't right, and I want to try to fix this system, or I'm going to remove myself from this environment. So I think my mom would be the person that really inspires me, and just listening to people like Focus who have gone through so much and still wake up, come and do this panel is so inspiring to me. So I would say that is what I gain my inspiration from.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I also want to tell you, you know, Focus, thanks for sharing, and you know, my condolences as well. For me, the two biggest, you know, supporters in my life would be my mom and my aunt. My mom has always been, you know, my biggest rock. She raised me by herself. Like, she, you know, was a teacher, so she was trying to, you know, basically make ends meet. You know, if I needed a book or anything, she would be given extra lessons, anything necessary. And in terms of my aunt, I wouldn't be in the U.S. if it wasn't for her. So she's been in the U.S. for over 40 years. She trained as a nurse in Britain, but she met her husband there, who was American. So she had to come here to start over completely. So I was kind of in a similar situation where she really encouraged me to broaden my horizons and come, you know, to the U.S. And, you know, it wasn't easy. I had done medical school abroad, so I had to literally start from scratch, do all of the American exams to, you know, just even qualify for applying for residency. So, you know, that was an inspiration to me, seeing somebody that had gone through something similar. So, yeah.
Once again, I want to thank everyone so much for participating in our Black is Beautiful panel. We deeply appreciate you all for coming through and listening to this powerful discussion. I don't know about y'all, but I'm truly leaving here inspired and motivated. And I think discussions like these help us grow as individuals and a community. And to our viewers, I hope you've learned something that you can apply to your future. And to our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your stories. And you showed us that you can really accomplish things despite the obstacles and barriers that we face. So thank you all so much.
And can we have a round of applause for the moderators? They did an awesome job. So fantastic job, the moderators. You guys did it very well. Very important. Thank you again, and hopefully we can get together, maybe live one day in person. Thank you so much. Take care and have a nice night, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.